I failed more times than I can count, and each time it felt like the world was closing in on me. My dreams seemed unreachable, my confidence shattered. I wondered, am I even capable of success? But here's the truth I discovered. Failure isn't the opposite of success, it's the path to it. Failure has a reputation. People fear it, people avoid it. They think that failing means the end of the road, that it's a mark of weakness or incompetence that defines who they are. I used to think that too. I used to believe that failing was something to be ashamed of, something that would stop me from moving forward. Every time I stumbled, every time I fell short, I carried a heavy weight of disappointment. I thought success was a straight line, a smooth climb from one achievement to the next. But life doesn't work that way. Success isn't a straight line, it's a jagged, unpredictable path, full of obstacles, detours, and moments that make you question yourself. And failure isn't a sign that you're on the wrong path. Failure is proof that you're walking it. I remember a time when I faced one of my biggest failures. I had poured my heart, my time, every ounce of energy into something I believed would succeed. I thought I was prepared. I thought I had planned everything perfectly, and yet it all fell apart. The project didn't succeed. The results weren't what I hoped for, and in that moment, it felt like the world had collapsed around me. I could have given up. I could have decided that I wasn't capable of achieving my dreams. I could have let that failure define my story, but something inside me refused to accept that. I realized that failure was not the end. It was a signal, a guidepost, a necessary part of the journey. Failure is feedback. It tells you what isn't working. It shows you where your weaknesses are. It forces you to face reality in ways that success never can. When you succeed without struggle, you might feel confident, but you don't grow. You don't stretch. You don't learn resilience. True growth comes when you fail, when you fall, when you are forced to pick yourself up and try again. Every failure is a lesson disguised as disappointment. Every mistake is a teacher waiting for you to pay attention. And the sooner you understand this, the sooner you stop fearing failure and start embracing it. When I started seeing failure as a path rather than a destination, everything changed. I stopped seeing it as something to avoid and started seeing it as something to learn from. Each failure became a step forward, a necessary building block on the road to success. I learned to dissect my failures, to ask the hard questions. What went wrong? How could I have approached it differently? What did I overlook? I stopped wasting energy blaming circumstances or other people and started focusing on what I could control: my effort, my mindset, my resilience. And with every failure, I became more prepared, more capable, and more determined. Failure also taught me humility. It reminded me that no one starts as an expert, that everyone struggles, that everyone faces moments of doubt and defeat. It showed me that success isn't about avoiding mistakes. It's about how you respond to them. The people who achieve greatness aren't those who never fail. They are the ones who fail again and again and refuse to quit. They see failure as part of the process, as an essential ingredient in the recipe of achievement. And perhaps most importantly, failure taught me patience. Success doesn't come overnight. The road is long, and it's paved with mistakes, missteps, and lessons that you can only learn through experience. Every failure is an opportunity to grow stronger, smarter, and more resilient. Every setback is preparing you for the victories that are still to come. I realized that failure is not a sign that I should stop. It's proof that I'm moving, that I'm trying, that I'm alive and ambitious enough to take risks. I began to embrace failure, to see it not as an enemy, but as a companion walking alongside me on the journey. I started celebrating my failures, not for the pain they caused, but for the lessons they brought. I learned to see the path of success not as a ladder I climb without stumbling, but as a trail I navigate full of obstacles that teach me how to be stronger, more resilient, and more determined than I was before. And in that realization, I discovered something incredible. Failure is not the opposite of success. It is the path to it. When life knocks you down, the first instinct is often to blame someone else, to curse your luck, or to hide from the discomfort. That's what most people do. They see failure as a punishment, something to avoid, something to fear. But what I learned is that the moment you stop running from failure and start asking questions, the moment you become curious about what went wrong, everything changes. Curiosity transforms setbacks into lessons, and self-reflection turns mistakes into stepping stones. I realized that every time I failed, I had a choice. I could let it break me, or I could let it teach me. I remember a moment in my life when I faced a huge setback. It felt like everything I had worked for was slipping through my fingers. The disappointment was crushing, and for a while, I didn't know what to do. I could have ignored the situation. I could have blamed others. I could have pretended it didn't matter. But instead, I asked myself, why did this happen? What am I missing? How can I see this differently? That simple act of curiosity changed everything. It shifted my focus from despair to understanding. Suddenly, the failure wasn't just an end. It was information, a clue, a map showing me the areas I needed to improve. Curiosity forces you to dig deeper. It forces you to examine your actions, your decisions, and your mindset. It makes you look at every misstep as a teacher, every rejection as a signpost, and every mistake as a lesson waiting to be discovered. When I started approaching failure with curiosity, I stopped fearing it. I started seeing setbacks not as punishments, but as opportunities to learn more about myself, about the world, and about the path I was walking. I began asking questions that mattered. What did I overlook? What assumptions did I make? How can I do better next time? These questions unlocked insights I would have never gained if I had just sulked in disappointment. Self-reflection is the companion to curiosity. It's not enough to just ask questions. You have to be willing to look honestly at yourself, to examine your actions without excuses, to confront your weaknesses without shame, and to acknowledge your strengths without arrogance. Reflection taught me to separate my identity from my failures. I learned that failing at something doesn't make me a failure. It just means there's room to grow. By reflecting, I discovered patterns in my thinking that were holding me back. I noticed habits that sabotage my progress. I saw fears that were disguised as rational reasons to quit. And with that knowledge, I could make conscious choices, change my approach, and take control of my journey. Curiosity and self-reflection also built resilience in ways nothing else could. When you understand why something went wrong, when you analyze your mistakes and extract lessons from them, you stop fearing the next challenge. You approach it with clarity and strategy instead of anxiety and doubt. You start to see failure as a temporary teacher, not a permanent sentence. I learned to embrace discomfort because I knew it was signaling growth. I learned to seek challenges because I knew they would teach me more than easy victories ever could. And there's another hidden benefit. Curiosity and reflection turn failure into a story worth telling. Every setback becomes a chapter in your journey. Every mistake, a plot twist that adds depth to your story. I realized that my failures were shaping me into someone stronger, wiser, and more prepared than I could have imagined. The questions I asked myself, the insights I gained, and the lessons I applied became the foundation for my future successes. Through curiosity and reflection, I stopped fearing failure and started seeing it as a guide. I learned to listen to the lessons it offered, to embrace the discomfort it brought, and to act on the insights it revealed. Every setback became an invitation to grow, every mistake an opportunity to improve, and every challenge a chance to become a better version of myself. It's so easy to blame the world when things go wrong. We point fingers at our circumstances, at other people, at the timing, at luck, at every external factor we can think of. I used to do it too. I blamed failures on bad breaks, on unfair situations, on things I couldn't control. It made me feel better for a moment because it relieved me of responsibility. If it wasn't my fault, then I didn't have to change. But here's the problem with that mindset. It keeps you stuck. It keeps you powerless. Blaming circumstances is like putting yourself in a cage and expecting the world to hand you the keys. True power comes when you stop blaming and start owning your life. I remember a time when I faced a major setback. Everything seemed to go wrong at once, and my first instinct was to complain, to argue, to make excuses. I wanted to tell everyone around me why it wasn't my fault, why I didn't deserve this, why the situation was unfair. But deep down, I knew that pointing fingers wasn't going to solve anything. It wasn't going to move me forward. The breakthrough came when I finally asked myself a simple but powerful question. What part of this am I responsible for? What can I do differently? That moment changed everything. Taking responsibility didn't make the failure worse. It gave me control. It gave me power over my next move. Responsibility is liberating. When you stop blaming and start owning, you start being a victim and start being a creator. You stop waiting for circumstances to change and start creating the change yourself. I realized that the world doesn't owe me fairness, luck, or ease. It doesn't owe me perfect conditions. If I wanted success, if I wanted growth, if I wanted to overcome challenges, I had to take ownership of my actions, my decisions, and my mindset. Every choice I made became mine to control. Every outcome became a reflection of what I could do better next time. Taking responsibility also forces clarity. When you blame circumstances, you cloud your vision. You distract yourself with excuses, and you fail to see the lessons in the situation. But when you own your actions, when you acknowledge your role in the outcome, you see things clearly. You understand what went wrong, why it went wrong, and how to fix it. I started analyzing my failures not to punish myself, but to understand myself. I asked hard questions. Did I prepare enough? Did I communicate clearly? Did I take the right steps? Answering these questions honestly gave me insight I couldn't have gained any other way. There's also a deep sense of accountability that comes with ownership. When you take responsibility, you honor your potential. You refuse to let circumstances dictate your life. You refuse to hand your power to someone else. I discovered that people who constantly blame the world never grow because they never step into their own power. They wait for things to be fair, for luck to favor them, for conditions to be perfect. But life rarely works that way. The people who succeed, the people who overcome failure, are the ones who own their choices, who take responsibility for their actions, and who refuse to let anything outside themselves determine their future. Responsibility also builds resilience. When you acknowledge your part in every outcome, you learn to adapt, to pivot, to adjust. You become proactive instead of reactive. You stop feeling stuck in the consequences of external events and start asking, what can I do now? How can I move forward? What lesson is here for me? That mindset transforms challenges into opportunities, obstacles into lessons, and failures into stepping stones. I learned to embrace responsibility in every area of my life. I stopped complaining about timing, about other people, about unfair circumstances. I stopped waiting for things to go my way. I started asking myself what I could do differently, what actions I could take, and what mindset I needed to develop to move forward. And with every failure I faced after that, I felt stronger, more capable, and more in control. Taking responsibility didn't make failure disappear, but it made me unstoppable. It gave me clarity, it gave me power, and it gave me the ability to turn every setback into a comeback. Failure doesn't care who you are, how smart you are, or how talented you think you are. Failure will come for everyone at some point. And when it does, it's not the failure itself that defines you, it's how you respond to it. Your mindset is the difference between being crushed by setbacks and being strengthened by them. I learned this the hard way through experiences that shook me to my core and forced me to confront not just my circumstances, but the way I thought about myself and my potential. I remember one particular failure that felt like the end of the world. I had put everything I had into a project, convinced it would succeed, only to see it collapse in ways I hadn't imagined. The disappointment was overwhelming. At first, I let it consume me. I doubted my abilities, questioned my decisions, and wondered if I was even capable of achieving my dreams. I wanted to give up, to retreat, to stop trying. But then I realized that giving in to despair wouldn't change anything. What mattered wasn't the failure itself. It was what I chose to do with it. A mindset that is fixed, one that sees failure as a judgment on your worth, will break you. It will convince you that you are incapable, that you are unlucky, that the world is against you. That mindset traps you in a cycle of fear, hesitation, and inaction. I've seen people give up on their dreams not because they weren't talented or capable, but because they believed one failure defined their entire journey. But a growth mindset, the mindset that failure is temporary, that mistakes are lessons, that challenges are opportunities, can transform failure into a powerful tool for success. I had to consciously choose this mindset. I had to train myself to see failure as a teacher rather than a punishment. I started asking questions that changed my perspective. What can I learn from this? How can I improve? What steps can I take to ensure I don't repeat this mistake? These questions rewired my thinking. Instead of seeing obstacles as threats, I began to see them as opportunities to grow stronger, smarter, and more resilient. Every setback became a lesson in strategy, patience, and perseverance. Mindset also determines how you handle fear. Fear is natural after failure. It whispers that you should quit, that you should avoid risk, that you should protect yourself from disappointment. But a strong mindset doesn't eliminate fear. It uses fear as fuel. I learned to acknowledge my fear without letting it control me. I reminded myself that fear was simply a signal that I was stepping into growth, that I was challenging myself, and that I was on the right path. By controlling my mindset, I transformed fear from a roadblock into a motivator, into a signal that I was moving in the right direction. Resilience is built through mindset. When you believe that failure can build you rather than break you, every setback becomes an opportunity to adapt and improve. You start to focus on solutions rather than problem, on growth rather than regret. I began to notice a pattern. The people who succeeded weren't the ones who avoided failure. They were the ones who embraced it, learned from it, and used it to fuel their next move. They approached challenges with determination, persistence, and a belief that every failure was preparing them for something greater. Mindset also shapes your perception of time and effort. When failure hits, it's easy to become impatient, to want immediate results, to judge yourself harshly. But with the right mindset, you understand that progress is gradual, that setbacks are part of the process, and that the lessons you learn today will compound into success tomorrow. I started celebrating small wins, appreciating incremental growth, and using failures as checkpoints to adjust my approach. This mindset gave me control over my journey, even when circumstances seemed uncontrollable. Ultimately, mindset is the lens through which you view every challenge. It decides whether failure becomes a source of despair or a source of strength. I realized that I could not control every outcome, but I could control how I thought about it. I could decide whether to let setbacks break me or whether to let them build me. And when I made that choice consistently, when I trained myself to respond with resilience, curiosity, and determination, I discovered an inner strength I never knew I had. When we talk about success, we often focus on talent, opportunity, or luck. We hear stories of people making it big, and we assume it happened quickly, that it came without struggle, without repeated failure. But the truth I've learned is very different. Success is rarely instantaneous. It is the result of persistence, the willingness to keep going even when it hurts, even when it seems pointless, and patience, the understanding that results take time and that growth cannot be rushed. Without these two qualities, failure can feel permanent, overwhelming, and discouraging. With them, failure becomes nothing more than a stepping stone on the path to eventual success. I've faced moments where I wanted to quit, where the obstacles seemed too great, where every effort felt like it was being wasted. I remember working tirelessly on a project, putting in long hours, sacrificing comfort, and still falling short. The natural response in those moments is doubt. The mind whispers, "Why bother? Maybe this isn't for you. Maybe you're not good enough." And that's where persistence comes in. Persistence is not about blind repetition. It's about commitment, about refusing to let temporary setbacks dictate the outcome of your life. It's about showing up again and again, even when no one sees, even when the progress seems invisible. Every time I persisted, I gained insight, experience, and strength, even if the immediate results weren't obvious. Patience is the companion to persistence. It is the understanding that success is a process, not a moment. So often we want immediate rewards, instant recognition, or fast results, but life doesn't work that way. Every meaningful achievement takes time. Skills must be honed, knowledge must be gained, connections must be built, and along the way, failures are inevitable. Patience allows you to stay focused on the long-term vision, to keep moving forward without being paralyzed by the slow pace of progress. I had to learn that setbacks are temporary and that the effort invested today compounds into results tomorrow. Without patience, persistence can become frustrating. With patience, persistence becomes unstoppable. Persistence and patience also teach resilience. When you continue despite repeated failure, you build a mental toughness that cannot be taught. I learned that the most successful people are not the ones who avoid failure. They are the ones who persist through it, who remain patient when the world seems to conspire against them, and who refuse to give up until their vision becomes reality. Each failed attempt, each rejection, each setback became part of the training, strengthening my resolve and sharpening my focus. I began to see failures not as endpoints, but as tests of commitment. If I could persist and remain patient, I would grow and eventually I would succeed. I also discovered that persistence and patience create opportunities that cannot be forced. Sometimes doors don't open immediately. Sometimes timing is everything. If I had given up at the first sign of struggle, I would have missed critical moments that later became turning points. By continuing to show up, by continuing to push forward, by maintaining faith in the process, I positioned myself to take advantage of opportunities when they arrived. Success is not only about effort, it's about sustained effort over time, combined with the patience to wait for the right moment. Another lesson I learned is that persistence and patience cultivate confidence. Every time I overcame a challenge, every time I pushed through exhaustion, frustration, or doubt, I proved to myself that I was capable. Each small victory, each minor breakthrough reinforced my belief that I could continue no matter how many times I had failed before. I stopped measuring progress by immediate results and started measuring it by consistency, by the refusal to quit, and by the growth I experienced along the way. Eventually, I began to understand that failure is not the enemy. It is a companion on the journey, testing your persistence, demanding your patience, and preparing you for success. The more persistent you are, the more patient you become. And the more failures you experience, the closer you get to the outcome you are striving for. I realized that the real secret of success is not avoiding failure. It is staying committed to your goals day after day with patience, with persistence, and with the unshakable belief that every setback is a step forward. Life has a way of testing us, of throwing obstacles in our path, of creating moments that feel impossible to overcome. We all experience setbacks, failures, rejections, missed opportunities, moments when everything seems to fall apart. And in those moments, it's natural to feel defeated, to feel like giving up, to question whether you have the strength to continue. But here's the truth I've learned: every setback, no matter how painful, is actually a setup for a stronger comeback. Every challenge is preparing you for growth, shaping you into someone capable of achieving more than you could have imagined. I remember a time when I faced a setback that shook me completely. I had invested my energy, my resources, and my hope into something I truly believed in, and it failed spectacularly. The disappointment was crushing, and for a moment, I questioned everything about myself, my abilities, my decisions, my future. I wanted to quit. I wanted to walk away. But something inside me refused to accept that this was the end. I realized that the failure itself was not the final story. It was a turning point, a challenge designed to prepare me for what was coming next. It was a signal that I needed to learn to adapt and to rise stronger than before. Setbacks are not punishments, they are lessons. They force us to pause, to reflect, and to assess what went wrong. They demand that we examine our approach, our mindset, and our strategy. I learned to ask myself difficult questions. What could I have done differently? Where did I miss the signs? What skills do I need to develop to overcome this challenge next time? By treating setbacks as opportunities for insight rather than signs of failure, I began to see them as stepping stones rather than roadblocks. I started to realize that the most successful people in the world didn't avoid setbacks. They used them as preparation for their greatest achievements. A key part of turning a setback into a comeback is perspective. It's easy to focus only on what you lost or what went wrong, but the real power lies in focusing on what you can gain, what you can learn, and how you can grow. I discovered that setbacks often expose weaknesses, but they also reveal strengths you didn't know you had. They test your resilience, your creativity, and your determination. Every time I faced a setback and chose to rise again, I became stronger, more capable, and more prepared for the next challenge. I began to see setbacks not as failures, but as preparation for future victories. Patience and persistence play a crucial role in this process. A setback doesn't produce instant results. It doesn't immediately teach you everything you need to know. It takes time to analyze, to adapt, and to implement changes that will lead to success. I learned to trust the process, to stay committed even when progress seemed invisible, and to keep moving forward despite discouragement. Every setback became a test of endurance, and every small step forward brought me closer to the breakthrough I was preparing for. Another important lesson is that setbacks build character. They teach humility, resilience, and the ability to persevere when circumstances seem unfair. I realized that the people who achieve remarkable success are often those who have faced the toughest setbacks. The challenges they endured shaped their strength, sharpened their focus, and fuel their determination. By embracing setbacks, I learned to see them as allies rather than enemies, tools that, when used correctly, can propel me to heights I never thought possible. Setbacks also teach gratitude and perspective. They show us what truly matters, what we are capable of enduring, and what we are willing to fight for. They remind us that success is never guaranteed, that it is earned through effort, resilience, and the willingness to rise each time we fall. I learned to embrace the discomfort of setbacks, to see them as opportunities to strengthen my mind, sharpen my skills, and clarify my purpose. Every setback, no matter how painful, was setting me up to come back stronger, wiser, and more determined than ever before. So as I stand here today, I want you to remember this: failure is not the end of your story. Every mistake, every setback, every moment of doubt is shaping you, teaching you, preparing you for something greater. The lessons you gain, the resilience you build, the mindset you develop, these are the real victories hidden within every challenge. Take responsibility, embrace curiosity, persist through the struggles, and trust the process. Know that each failure is not a dead end, but a stepping stone. Every setback is a setup for your comeback. Your journey is not defined by the times you fall. It is defined by the strength, courage, and determination with which you rise. Keep moving forward. Keep learning, keep believing, and your success will not just come, it will be unstoppable.